Welcome to the SwimSwam podcast. I'm your host, Coleman Hodges. Joining us today, she is the world record holder for longest consecutive swim ever. Today, we're talking to Sarah Thomas. Sarah, how's it going?
It's going good. I'm really excited to be here.
We have to start with this at the top of the podcast. You called out Michael Phelps on Twitter because Young Thug had tweeted at him asking if he could swim 100 miles, I guess, in the ocean out and back. And he said he thought he could. You called him out and said, not so sure about that one, buddy. You're the GOAT in the pool, but open water is a whole different story. So you've done 100-mile swim before. That's what you have a world record in. So let's start there. What goes into a 100-mile swim?
A lot goes into a 100-mile swim. And I feel pretty confident that Michael Phelps could maybe get there someday if he really wanted to, but I'm not sure he would really want to. It's pretty brutal. He would probably do it quite a bit faster than I did it. But, there's just so much time in the pool and face down in a lake, and no one else wants to swim with you that long. It's not like when you're on a swim team and you've got your buddies, in the lane next to you and you're being tortured together. When you're training for 100 miles open water, you're doing most of that alone. And it's just kind of this brutal combination of really hard, really high intensity training, really long distance training. You're doing pool workouts, you're doing open water workouts, and 98% of it is by yourself. No one else wants to do that kind of crazy stuff.
Yeah. So you swam 104.6 mile swim across Lake Champlain. That was in 2017, but you had a lot of experience in a myriad of other open water swims before this. Let's get into this background of how did you get into open water swimming to begin with?
Yeah. So I swam, as an age group kid all the way up. I started when I was 10, swam, through high school. I walked on to the University of Connecticut and swam 4 years for UConn, moved to Denver for grad school and joined a master's swim team. And it was kind of in that master's swim team group. There was a friend and he hadn't known me very long. And he just one day, he was like, you know what, Sarah, you need to do this Horseshoe 10K race. And I'm like, I don't know what that means, dude. And he's like, well, there's this race in a reservoir, kind of, an hour north of where we're at now. And they do a 10K every year and it's beautiful. And he's like, I think you would be really good at it. And, I'm
hold on. Can we pause?
Mm-hmm.
What events did you swim in college or high school?
Yeah. So I started off life as a breaststroker, had a pretty solid 200 breaststroke. And then, somewhere in there, I wasn't getting any faster. And so my coach was like, you know what? I think you need to do some distance stuff. So later on in high school and into college, I was, 500,000 mile, all of that good stuff. Pretty sure my coach in college would throw me in the 400 IM just so he has something to laugh about every now and again, because my butterfly is pretty atrocious. But yeah, it was definitely a distance swimmer all the way through, pretty much where it counted.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So sorry, I was just curious about that.
Question.
So that trajectory obviously tracks as well. So back to this 10K.
Yeah. So we're at this 10K, right? And, we did 10K workouts, through high school and in college, so I'm familiar with that distance. And then the idea of doing it without stopping, without having a place to put your feet on the bottom of the pool. I was like, that's impossible. You can't possibly swim a 10K nonstop. It's just bananas. And so he had to work on me for about a year before I finally gave in. I'd been out of the pool for about a year, 2 years before I kind of came back to it as an adult, but kind of rebuilt a lot of endurance. And then, I signed up for this 10K and he was right. I totally 100% fell in love with open water swimming. It's just, I love water and I've always loved water. I was a walk-on at UConn. So obviously I'm not this incredibly fast special swimmer, but it was like when I discovered open water, it was like, oh, this is where I belong. This is where I should be. And I'm kind of an extreme personality. So, I did this 10K a couple of times. I'm like, all right, 6 miles, that's easy now. Let's try for 20. And then it just kind of escalated from there. So I, did a bunch of like mid-distance, channel swimming. So I swam the Catalina Channel from Catalina Island back to the coast of California. I swam around the island of Manhattan, just like 28 miles. And you're like staring at all the skyscrapers as you go, and it's like super cool. I did the English Channel one time, and then, just kind of built things and built things and built things in open water, going farther, going colder, and just trying to see what challenges were out there that were fun and exciting.
I love how you're like natural progression, 6 miles to 20 miles.
Yeah, it's easy jump, just like easy.
That's the logical next step.
Yes.
Wow.
For most people, truly.
Right. So first off, just what did you enjoy about these long open water swims? I mean, personally, I still swim in a pool. I hate open water swimming because I can't see anything. I don't know what's around me, and it freaks me out. But what do you enjoy about open water, or what did you enjoy about that initial swim?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Texas, and lakes in Texas are not places that you like think, oh yeah, I'm going to jump in that. Because they're brown, you never know what kind of like creepy snakes are out there. So like growing up, open water didn't even like occur to me, because like no one wants to go jump in Lake Texoma. You know what I mean? Like it's just gross. And moving to Colorado, the lakes here are very different. And so they're clear, they're a little bit colder, and you can see things. And I think that's what I love about it is like you're just kind of out in nature. You're not confined to 25 yards or 50 meters of a swimming pool. You can go explore. Training is a little bit more interesting because you're not just going back and forth all day long in the pool. You can go swim to another point across a lake, or go swim down the beach, and it's just like a varied experience because you're just out in the world, and it's you and the elements, and there's fish, and there's wind, and there's waves, and just a more textured environment than what you get in the pool. And I don't mind the pool. I spent a lot of time in the pool, but there's just something about fresh water, about salt water, being in a lake, being in an ocean. It's just empowering in a way because this is me and my body, and we're taking on the ocean today.
Yeah. Okay, well, you kind of sold me on it now. Jeez.
Good. You gotta go. You gotta try.
Seriously. I mean, so that's really cool. That sounds great. So as you started doing bigger, or I guess longer swims, or as you mentioned, in colder water, I guess you started looking for the next challenge. When did this 100-mile swim eventually come on your radar?
Yeah, it was just like a culmination of just a couple of years of like, so I did a 44-mile swim in Lake Tahoe in 2013. And then like right behind that, I did a 50-mile swim like 6 weeks later. And both of these swims people had tried and like not made it, had to get out and failed. And kind of said like, oh, these distances in these lakes are impossible. And I knocked them out, back to back with, like 6 weeks in between. And so kind of those experiences doing the Lake Tahoe swim took 22 hours. The 50-mile swim took me 30 hours. And it's like, you know what? I still have more left in the tank. Like I can do this. And so kind of just building into that, I had a couple of like longer swims planned here and there, and in open water swimming, weather is a big factor. So I had a long swim planned in 2014 and didn't get to do it because the weather was atrocious and was not safe to go out. And then in 2015, I already had some commitments. And so in 2016, I said, you know what, this is my year. And so I planned an 80-mile swim in Lake Powell. We started at Bullfrog Marina and swam all the way down to Wahweap. If anyone's been to Lake Powell, you know what that looks like. And it's long, windy, really beautiful stretch of water. And that was probably like the life-changing minute for me there. I did that swim. It was hard. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, even since. And, I walked out the end of 80 miles. It took me 56 hours where I didn't sleep. I didn't get on a boat. I'm just constantly swimming nonstop for, 2.5 days. And I got out and I like threw my arms in the air and did a little hop. And I was like, oh my gosh, that was just the most incredible thing I've ever done. and we were not even home. And I was like, I got to go 100 miles. I did 80 miles. Like, I got more. I got to do 100 miles. So that's what
Holy Toledo. So this 80-mile swim at Lake Powell is the hardest swim you've ever done. 56 hours, that's 2.5 days roughly.
Yeah.
I have so many questions. Wow.
I know.
How do you what is nutrition like? What was nutrition like during that race? How do you eat? How do you drink? How do you make sure your body stays fueled?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. So kind of the way it works in open water swimming, you usually have a boat or a kayak next to you. And so they can provide you with basically whatever you need. Obviously in Lake Powell, we're out in the middle of nowhere. So we had to like plan ahead and bring it all on this houseboat.
Where is Lake Powell?
It is in Utah and Arizona.
Okay.
And it feeds into the Grand Canyon.
Oh, wow.
And so you're basically swimming through a flooded Grand Canyon. So you've got these like beautiful like canyon walls, and it's just like this stunning scenery all around you, and it's just like it's inspiring scenery because and like this water is going into the Grand Canyon, like that's where it's headed next. So it's like a lake in the middle of the Grand Canyon basically, and it's really remote, right? There's not good cell service. You're literally in the middle of the wilderness. And so we had to bring it all and plan ahead. I had like 10 people with me on the boat. And so I'm planning for their nutrition, my nutrition, all of that. And so basically 90% of what I eat and drink when I'm on a swim is liquid. And so they just throw me a water bottle on a rope, like aim it at my head when I'm swimming. And then I stop and grab it and chug like 8 ounces of it. And then I drop it and they pull it back in. So the mix that I drink is mostly like a carbohydrate mix. So I'm getting about 250 calories an hour in carbohydrates, a little bit of protein, some electrolytes, and it's all in my bottle. I will say on like the longer swims that last a couple of days, sometimes you get hungry for like solid foods. You're like, I just want to chew on something. And so like 24 hours, it's like, what do we got on that boat? So I love to like just snack on like rice. It's a really good treat. Cookies, M&Ms, pretty much anything that sounds good in the moment.
Okay. What do you eat like the night before or 2 nights before a swim like that?
Man, well, I've learned what not to eat, and that is spaghetti, because if I have that the night before, guarantee we're going to see it pretty soon into the swim. So I definitely stay away from spaghetti. I try and keep it simple, just like some grilled chicken, some lettuce, like a salad. I really love it, just a fresh salad. I don't know, it's like people say that, I say that to people and they're like, that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard, but just simple, basic. Want to make sure that nothing's going to upset my stomach, because it's easily done when you're swimming for multiple days.
I can imagine. Yeah. So I guess that's one physical aspect of it. Mentally, first of all, how do you prepare? What are you doing the night before, or where is your mind the night before a swim like that?
Yeah, you have to like compartmentalize and just not think about it. If you focus too much on the idea that you're going to be swimming for 3 days, like it's overwhelming, right? Like no one can swim for 3 days. Like I've done it and I still don't know how it gets done. And so you just have to like push it aside, right? You have to stay in the moment. You have to stay present. And so like the night before, it really is like, are all my supplies organized? Does my team know what to do? And just making sure all the logistics are checked off. And then when you're swimming, it really is just staying in the moment. I stop every 30 minutes for my feed. So they throw the bottle at me every half an hour. And so everything is just broken down into 30-minute increments. And you just swim 30 minutes at a time, 30 minutes at a time. And then suddenly you're at like 56 hours and it's incredible.
Snap of a finger.
Yeah, goes by. You wouldn't even know that you had done anything.
I'm sure that's most people's reactions to that. So then, yeah, like you said, there's 30-minute compartments. What do you think about this? Is a question we got a lot of on Instagram. What are you thinking about during this 56-hour swim, which, as you said, you compartmentalize into 30-minute increments?
Yeah, you think a lot about everything. The best is when you can like meditate, right? You're just kind of in the zone. You're not thinking about time. You're just thinking about your stroke. You're listening to the water and just kind of absorbing the moment. So like, obviously that's the ideal. When you can get there, that's fabulous. But obviously over the course of a couple of days in the water, you can't stay that way 100% of the time. Maybe you've got a shoulder ache, or your stomach is upset, or you're worried about the weather, or the waves are knocking you around. So that just kind of knocks you straight out of your zone. And then your mind just wanders. I would say, I think about anything that you've ever thought of during those times. You know, like sometimes I'm thinking about work. You know, I was in the middle of Lake Champlain, and I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot to email Kim before I left. Right. So stuff like that pops into your head. I relive arguments or discussions that I've had with people. I'm like, gosh, I was so stupid. Why did I say that? So, you know, just all of those kinds of things go through your mind. You know, the time passes. You know, you get there eventually. It is a major test in patience. I will say that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I bet it is. So my mom runs ultra marathons, and I know that I've talked to people who have done 100-mile races or races where you run for 24 plus hours at a time. You run through the night, you run through the day, and they've told me that at some point you get to a point where you start hallucinating, and not like bad hallucinating, but you know, you're going along and you haven't slept in 16 or 18 or 24 hours, and you just start kind of seeing things in the periphery. Is there any sense of that in a swim like this?
Yeah, so I will say I follow a lot of ultra runners. I was like, these are my people, because they're going through a lot of what I was going through. And so when I was training for Lake Powell in 2016, I was really looking at like ultra runners to like, how do they handle these situations? And I learned about hallucinating. And I was like really prepared for it because I didn't know what to expect. You know, I talked to so many people about what it would look like asked questions like, am I going to do permanent damage to myself? If I push through, even when I'm tired and hallucinating, like it was a major, major concern. You know, ultra runners are totally tough and crazy, but like they can sit down and take a nap if they want to. I don't have that luxury in the water, right? I can't just like roll over on my back and float and think I'm going to take a nap. It just, you don't float like that. And so I was really concerned about it, but kind of went into it with some knowledge that like, you know, my body's going to do what it's going to do. It's going to be fine. And then I was like really disappointed because I had never hallucinated. And I was like really looking forward to it. I was like, this is going to be cool. I'm prepared. And I've never done it. It's like, I feel kind of like I've been gypped in the ultra experience, that I've like never hallucinated like flying birds or pizzas, or, you know what I mean? Like, it would be neat.
Well, especially like in the water, I wonder if that would be a completely different experience than hallucinating on land. Yeah. I guess maybe we'll get there. Maybe science will get there one day.
Right. Yes.
I'm also not unconvinced that running ultra races doesn't take time off your life. You had alluded to that earlier, and I don't, you know, jury's out in my book on that one. It seems pretty wild, but so just swimming that race, how does fatigue affect you? You know, it's like, do you feel tired physically at any point? I mean, I'm sure you do, but how does that manifest itself? Do you get sleepy being in the water and constantly moving for that long?
Yeah. I will say like the night times are really hard. I always tell people it's really fun to swim through one sunset and one sunrise. So when you start adding multiples of that into a swim, it just gets kind of draining, right? And you're like, gosh, the sun is going down, you know, and it just gets colder overnight. Like 3 to 5 a.m. is probably the worst time in any swim because it's just cold, it's dark, and like just you're miserable. No matter what you do to try and combat it, it's just a hard time, and you just have to figure out how to swim through it. I will say I'm not a big caffeine drinker, and so like on my super long swims, kind of usually around the 30-hour mark, we switch. I take Noon electrolyte tabs, and so I switch them from like just regular no caffeine electrolytes to caffeinated electrolytes with my Noon. And that just seems to give me just enough of a boost that it keeps me awake. I have been drowsy. There was a time in Lake Champlain, it was sunset on the third day. I've been swimming for, I don't know, close to 60 hours at that point. And I was like, I'm getting pretty tired here, guys. And I told my crew, I'm like, please watch me. Like, if I go under, please come get me. And so I've had those moments, but it seems like at some point you just recalculate, and your body's like, all right, we're still doing this. We're going to be all right. We're going to keep going.
Wow. That makes sense. And yeah, that I think would have been my guess, but it's intense.
Yes, it is a little intense.
How long does it take after a swim like that for you to recover?
It kind of depends on the swim. So the very first really long swim I did was Catalina, 20 miles. It took me 9 hours, and I could not raise my arms over my head for 3 or 4 days. I was just really beat up. I will say, kind of as I have gotten more into it, I feel like the recovery is almost a little bit faster. And so obviously the next day you're pretty tired. You've got to catch up on your sleep. Muscles are sore and stiff, but not as bad as you might imagine. I usually like to get in the next day or 2 days later and just do some breaststroke and just try to loosen it up. But I'd say the general recovery is a couple of days. I will say mentally the recovery sometimes feels like it takes me months to really want to get back into long training or intense training. You just got to take a break, and your body kind of forces you into that a little bit. You just have to listen to what your body is telling you. You'll know when it's time to get back into training and get back to it. But that piece of it seems to take a long time.
Yeah. In terms of when you do one of these swims, what time do you start, or what time of the day do you feel like it's best to start the swim?
Yeah. So in my 2 lake swims, so Lake Powell and Lake Champlain, they're lakes, and so you're not bound to currents and tides. A lot of ocean swims like Catalina, you start that at 11 o'clock at night because that's just the best time for the currents and the wind and the conditions. When I've done the English Channel, did the English Channel 4-way, you have to start when the tides are going, and you don't get to decide. And so, we started, my 4-way English Channel at midnight, not an ideal time. So if I get a pick, I'd like to start in 8 in the morning. So you get a nice night's sleep, you just kind of wake up, and then you just go for a swim. I feel like that's probably the most ideal, but open water swimming, you don't get the most ideal. You have to be prepared for what nature throws at you.
Gotcha. You mentioned the English Channel 4-way swim, which you did in 2019, which is an 84-mile swim. What does that mean, English Channel 4-way?
I know. Sorry, I jumped right ahead on you on that one. I couldn't hold it in anymore. So in 2019, I swam the English Channel 4 times in a row without stopping. And no one had ever done that before. There was 4 people ahead of me who had done it 3 times. And I was like, 3 is not enough. Let's try for a 4-way. So it was a consecutive, I swam from England to France, back to England, back to France, and then turned around and went back to England 1 more time just for fun.
Wow. Okay. I see. And I think I've got my timeline right here. But before that, you had breast cancer.
Yeah.
Is that correct? Okay.
I
So
sure
this
did.
was after the Lake Champlain. So after the 100-mile swim. Yeah. Can you tell us about that and how that not only affected your training, but perhaps how swimming and your training got you through that?
Yeah, sure. So I had kind of before COVID, I'd had a busy few years. So I swam 80 miles in Lake Powell in 2016, did 100 miles in Lake Champlain in 2017. 2 months after Lake Champlain, I got diagnosed with breast cancer. So I spent all of 2018 going through breast cancer treatment. I did chemo, I had a mastectomy, had radiation. So it was literally 9 months of nothing but chemo. And then when I finished all my cancer treatment, I had 1 year, literally exactly 1 year to get ready to do this English Channel 4-way swim. I booked the English Channel swim before my cancer diagnosis and just kind of waiting. There's a wait list to swim the English Channel, believe it or not. And so like all during my cancer treatment, I'm talking to my doctors, and initially, of course, you're like, am I going to live? Like, how bad is this? But once you kind of get over, so like, okay, I'm probably most likely going to be okay. And this is what the treatment plan looks like. I'm doing well in treatment. And then you start asking like, am I going to be able to swim 80 miles again? And your doctors are like, what? Like, what planet are you from? Like, you have breast cancer. You're in the middle of chemo and you're asking about swimming 80 miles.
What do you mean again?
Yeah, exactly. And so, it was a different perspective. I was lucky. I had a really supportive medical team. And we made a lot of decisions that we felt were the best to help keep me like in the water, keep me swimming. I swam a lot during chemo. Well, a lot is relative, but I was probably in the water 3 to 4 days a week during chemo, just because it felt good. I was not training or doing anything too terribly intense, but the movement felt good, and like you put your swim cap on and you can just swim, and like no one around you has to know that you're sick and there's something wrong with you, right? You can just go and be free and be yourself. And it was just mentally probably the most important thing I did during chemo was just be in the water and just move. I definitely 100% swim for mental health in normal times. I'd say going through cancer treatment, like, I don't know that I would have made it if I hadn't had just swimming to fall back on when I was stressed or just like needed a break from thinking about cancer. And so, I think it was important. I had a goal ahead of me. So, I could kind of get through the day-to-day cancer knowing that like I still had dreams, I still had goals. I wasn't done yet. I still had a lot left to prove. And I think that really, that's powerful stuff to just know that like, I'm not giving in to this. My body's going to do what it's going to do. And I know I got lucky that my cancer reacted to chemo and to radiation and we were able to get rid of it. A lot of that's luck. But I think just mentally and physically, having that drive, having those goals really helped me a lot.
It's really heartwarming to hear. And, just as a fellow swimmer and aquatic being, it's reassuring knowing that other people feel the same way about just being in the water and being able to move. Seeing lifelong swimmers always really warms my heart, especially because I think at a young age, swimming can be such a droll and gray sport and drive a lot of people away. But so I do have some data of these day-to-day questions for you. Okay. So if you're training for, let's say, that English Channel 4-way swim, which is 84 miles, what does a normal training week look like for you?
Yeah, it can be intense. I know there was at some point I like added it up. I was like, I think I swam more this week than I ever did in college. And it's like kind of like, but I would say, my base is like 60K a week. And then I build up from there. And so, I'm doing doubles, I go to the pool twice a day on Tuesdays and Thursdays, do long, 10 to 12 hour swims on the weekend in the lakes. I do have a full-time job, so I'm balancing like all this training with trying to work. And so it's kind of hard to fit it all in and juggle it all. But I'd say I think my maximum week was probably around 120 kilometers in a week. But it's legit training.
And is a lot of like, are you doing more traditional swim sets or are you just getting in a pool and swimming for time?
When I'm in the pool, I'm doing traditional swim sets. So we do intervals. I competed at University of Connecticut. So like, I feel like I've got a good like pool background. And so I kind of pull off of those workouts and things that I did growing up. It gives me a really good base of how to design a workout, how to make a workout. I do hundreds all out sometimes. I don't do a lot of starts and turns. Those are kind of irrelevant to what I need. But for the most part, I'm doing really hard pool splits and descending intervals and negative splitting and all kinds of stuff. It's a good time.
Do you do a lot of your pool work in a short course, in a yards pool, or in a long course pool?
Short course. There's not a ton of long course pools in Denver, and especially since COVID. I don't remember the last time I've been in a 50-meter pool. It's been a really long time. Since the pandemic, I'm telling you, I've been swimming in a 3-lane gym pool. It's just like this tiny box. It's like, gosh. My mom came to visit once and she was like, I cannot believe you swim in this pool. But it's what I have available. So, you make do. Water is water, is what I always say.
So yeah, we have this question from Instagram. What's the hardest swim set you've ever done in your life?
Oh my gosh. All right. So my friend Mike, we swim together a lot. And he's got this set of 400s. And we call it the Mike murder set. So it's 10 400s. And basically the intervals descend. So like every 400 is a different interval. So you kind of start where your base is, and then you drop to like a fast one. And then you kind of drop your base 5 seconds and back to fast, and drop your base and back to fast. So they kind of like, you get a little bit of a rest and then not. So you think you're good until about number 5. And then you hit number 6 and you think you're going to die. And we do it like, you have to be in the mood for it. And so sometimes he'll walk in, Mike will, and he'll be like, all right, you ready for a murder set today? And it's like, yeah, but it makes you want to cry. It makes you want to vomit. But when you finish and you make all of the intervals, which I fail frequently, it feels really, really good.
Yeah. Dude, no kidding. You can make 10 fours all. That has to be the pinnacle of accomplishment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. And they're fast too. Like, I don't know, I would say I'm old now, but like I get my base, I can usually hold about 115. And so like we descend those to like, I don't know, 450. And so those are my fast ones. And so I'm like cranking really hard. So that's fast for a 40-year-old woman, trust me.
Dude, that's fast for me. If I did that right now, I'm 30, like I'd be stoked. Yeah. I don't know that I could.
Yeah, it makes you want to die, but that's all right. It's good character building.
Yeah. I'm sure this is building a lot of character, but on the physical side, how do you manage just wear and tear on your body and making sure that you're not, totally injuring yourself, injuring a shoulder, tearing something with all this yardage that you're racking up?
Yeah, I really believe in like a slow build. So like if I've taken some time off, you definitely have to ease back into it. You don't just jump in and start like doing Mike murder sets right away. Like that's not good for you. I do consider myself pretty lucky. I've never really had shoulder issues. I think technique is really important. So if you're coming up and you're wanting to do longer stuff, you've got to focus on technique just to make sure that you're not putting your shoulders in a compromised position. So I think just good technique in the pool, consistent building, consistent training is huge. I know all the swimmer tricks about doing your Ys and your Ts and, all of those good, just shoulder flexibility and strengthening. So I do some of that, but not a ton. I wish I had more time to do like just straight weights and yoga. Just in my life, I don't have time for all of that good stuff, but I'm really protective of my shoulders. And if I feel a twinge or a tweak, I definitely back off and make sure that I'm staying healthy that way. I think it's really important.
Yeah. All right. We've got time for a couple more questions. I heard you had a tea obsession. Can you elaborate on that one?
I do. I'm not a big coffee drinker. And I've spent a lot of time in the UK over the last few years. And so when I was in Northern Ireland this summer, people were like blowing me up over like which tea is the best. So I had to sample all of these teas, and I love tea anyway. And but yeah, I don't know if I'm like Irish by background. I have no idea, but tea is really important, and they taste different. And like black tea is not black tea, and you got to have the good stuff. So I will say, all my Northern Ireland friends, I'm going to start a riot if they listen to this, but I think I've decided that Barry's tea is my favorite, just black daily drinker tea. And I'm going to get in trouble for that. So maybe we need to not share that. But Barry's tea, I'm telling you, it's delicious.
Is Barry's like the cheap stuff? Why would they start?
Yeah, it's just like your daily. I don't know. There's like Barry's and there's Lions and there's Tetley, and people get fired up. Like friendships are lost over what your favorite tea is in the UK. And people get mad. So it's showing my true colors by telling you that I like Barry's. Like I'm gonna lose friends over this.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So you're a big tea drinker.
Yeah.
All right, my last question. This was from Instagram too. Someone wanted to know, what is your best 50 freestyle time?
Oh my gosh, it's so embarrassing. I think this is a long time. I'm going back to high school here. I'm pretty sure from a relay start, I went like a 26 one time, like a 26 high. But I think from a dive, we're talking maybe a 27 low. Like, I'm not a sprinter. My best time, I will tell you, in 100 freestyle, I did that in a 200 freestyle. My best time in a 200 freestyle, I did that in the 500. So if that tells you anything, there was something madly wrong with me in the pool.
Wait, so let me get this right. You went 3 best times in one race?
Yes.
Oh, I mean, that's a win. I don't know. That's
right. I don't know.
And also, I guess that's somewhat telling of what kind of an athlete you are as well.
Yes.
But
yes,
awesome.
That's what I look back and it's like, we should have known, right? Like, we should have known that the mile was not long enough. But now I know, and now I'm embracing it. And 100 miles is great.
Well, Sarah, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and chat with us. It's been really great hearing your story and experience in open water. Do you have any parting thoughts for our audience before we sign off today? Anything someone interested in open water might want to hear or know?
I mean, it's just great. I have that swimming pool background. I love pool swimming and I love the training. They give open water a shot, like it's a different vibe. I got to a point in like my pool swimming where I just wasn't hitting goal times. And switching to open water was just freeing because it's no longer about like how fast can you do it. It's just if you can do it. And I just love that freedom of just like testing my potential, testing my limits, and just not having to worry about how fast I'm doing it, just worrying about getting it done. Like point A to point B is all that matters in an open water swim. And it's amazing. It's incredible to have that freedom and not like be worried about hundredths of a second. They don't matter in open water swimming.
You've been listening to the SwimSwam podcast. Stay tuned for new episodes every week. You can take SwimSwam podcast on the go by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Look for links in the description below, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos as well.